Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is the show where we talk about technology and how a better understanding of it can help you use the leverage it provides at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. We're going to kick things off, as we like to do, with a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. We'll start with Security Now 679 Android Information Leak.
This is Twit.
For years, I've been involved with Android. I've just gotten used to it at this point. It's just the way it is. Another vulnerability that leads to something.
Just wear your armor. Just yes. So, all versions of Android running on all devices are believed to be affected because this was what we're going to describe here is a core Android function, which Google has fixed in the most recent Android Pie release, but has said they have no plans to fix in older versions. And they're saying you're encouraged to upgrade to Android Pie or later. Well, I don't have to tell you, Jason, the likelihood of that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, in many places you can't. I mean, it's just not an option. You're stuck with the Android that you have. And the Android that you have, if it predates Pi, is subject to a CVE. This is the Common Vulnerabilities and Exploits database, 2018-9489, which has been assigned to this problem. And all Android devices prior to Pi, until they're updated, or maybe there'll be a patch, we'll see. So what's going on? The OS broadcasts on purpose system messages, which are global, and which any application can indicate. They're called intents, and any application can raise its hand and say, "I'd like to receive those, please." And it then receives them without any user permission oversight. So these are not things like permission to use the camera or other major aspects of the system. These are sort of regarded as internal stuff that's going on. Unfortunately, the messages include the Wi-Fi network name to which the device is currently associated, the BSS ID, the local IP address, the DNS server information, and the device's own static MAC address. Some of this information, such as MAC addresses, has long since been recognized as sensitive, and it has no longer been made available through standard Android APIs since Android 6. But now we're at 9, and even in before 6, 7, and 8, that MAC address is available via the broadcast. So this argues that that Google masking the MAC address wasn't fully done. The API to request it was removed from, but you can still raise your hand and say, broadcast it to me, and then you receive it. So by listening to these broadcasts, which are continuous, any application on the device can capture this information, which in turn has the effect of bypassing all permission checks and existing mitigations. So this leakage does undermine Android's system of permissions. Of course, we know that MAC addresses do not change and are tied to the hardware. So this can be used to uniquely identify and track any Android device even when MAC address randomization is used. Because as we've discussed here, MAC address randomization is the access point association MAC. It was realized some time ago, and Android and iOS both fixed this, and I guess Windows did too, that wandering around and not just like anywhere, Wi-Fi is so present that it's just, you're bathed in Wi-Fi now. So it turns out that any access point could see the MAC addresses of does see the MAC addresses of every Wi-Fi enabled thing within its reach, even those that don't associate with it, that never have and don't. So what we realized was, okay, that's not so good. So MAC address randomization causes the client to just generate an arbitrary random MAC address during the time that it is not associated. But when it associates, only then do you get the true MAC address. So that's sort of a nice privacy trade-off that works, and which everybody is doing. The problem is that any app running in Android prior to 9 is able to determine the physical unrandomized MAC address, the network name, and the BSS ID. And of course, there are databases. There's Wiggle, W-I-G-L-E, and Skyhook, both which are comprehensive databases of exactly that information, which would allow software to geolocate the user using that information, even when that software has not been granted any location permission, when location is completely shut off on the device, presumably because the user wants privacy. This is still disclosing it. So unless some sort of mitigation is made available, this is the way it's going to be on all Android prior to 9. There's a cool website. I thought I had it here, the website.
Are you talking about the app? Or?
Yeah, the Android Broadcast Monitor.
Broadcast Logger, or let's see here. Internal Broadcast Monitor? Yes, it was. Yes, Internal Broadcasts Monitor is the application developed by a developer who also put the source on GitHub. Internal Broadcasts Monitor is available through Google Play, and so you can install it from the Play Store. You tap Start, and you start observing all of the traffic which is available to it, not having obtained any permissions whatsoever. You look for android.net.wifi.statechange and android.net.wifi.p2p.thisDevice.changed messages and the data they carry, and you will see all this. So, not a huge problem, but if a user is interested in not being located, the only way to do that before 9, and until this is maybe fixed by a third-party patch, or maybe Google will reconsider their position. But on the other hand, there's all these phones that are not Google and that are not being patched, would be to turn off Wi-Fi, because it basically is by, the software is still going to know your MAC address. Well, okay, you stalled it on your phone, so that's where it is. But these days, Wi-Fi is essentially leaking your position by virtue of the fact that we have databases of just comprehensive databases of network names and BSS IDs, and software is able through these messages to know what you're connected to and what device you are, and so produce long-term tracking. And of course, it's able to send the information out wherever it wants to. So we may be talking more about this in the future. It's kind of disappointing when they stop at like the current version with nothing prior. I mean, this Pi is on so few devices that it doesn't even make Android's developer
platform for or the dashboard for showing how many percentages all of the reporting devices and what OS. Like Pi's not even on there yet, which basically means it's less than 0.1% distribution at this point in time, at least at the the time that this report was pulled. So it's not even appearing on their report that tracks this stuff, let alone those are the only devices that actually get any of this protection.
So it's not inaccurate to say, kind of at this point, virtually all Android devices are currently enabling this broadcasting, and any apps which I imagine will start appearing are able to, because I mean it's meant to be system global broadcasts. So the fact that an app is saying I want to watch these doesn't, it's not going to make the app stand out. It's not something where Google could say, oh, you shouldn't be asking for this. No, it's a broadcast.
Yeah. And Google obviously knows this is not a good thing. They patched it.
That's why why they fixed it.
That's a bummer.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. I'm Dave Duncan, and that was a clip from twit.tv, Security Now 679, Android leaks. So yeah, that was a callback to the stories we were doing last week about, even when you turn off location data on your Google phone, it's not turned off in all the various applications that essentially have information about where you were. Like, say, when you did have your GPS on for your Google mapping or whatever, where you're getting your turn-by-turn directions, you'll find that even when you've turned off location information, that that data doesn't disappear. It's still, the map location history within Google Maps is still there, and just endless examples like that. But this one is strangely universal because, it's basically broadcasting this information within the internal infrastructure to any program on your phone that wants it. And each program is basically a little beachhead on your phone for the person who put it there and or the people who bought the company who made the program that you put there. So keep in mind, even if you trust the person who wrote that, that neat flashlight app for you, if someone said, hey, there's a lot of people out there with this app on their phone, I'm going to buy that company, I'm going to send out an update, and now, all those phones belong to me, kind of thing. And any application that has some space on your phone can listen in on those system messages, and those system messages say a lot about what's going on. Now, it's information that on the face of it's kind of innocuous. What's the name of the Wi-Fi hotspot that you're connected to? But as I said, people have collected databases of this. Like every time an app, just say a phone is running such an app that is feeding everything it's sensing back to headquarters. And it only takes a handful of these out in the world to do this. Every time they wander by a hotspot, it says, oh, I see this name hotspot, and I know my GPS coordinates are here. I'm going to report that information back to headquarters. And later on, when you see this kind of information we were just talking about, where the Android was leaking to all the applications about, oh, here's the Wi-Fi hotspot I'm connected to. Well, there's a database somewhere where someone, almost certainly many someones, have kept an up-to-date record of where is that hotspot located on the earth. And so that information is tantamount to just go ahead and giving you the GPS location of the person. And beyond that, even if there's multiple hotspots that have the same name, it may be possible. I wasn't clear to me from the story if it was also giving away the MAC address, which is unique for the hotspots. But even if it wasn't, the number of hotspots with the identical name, and given the additional history of the context of you, they can probably figure out, it's like, oh, okay, he's around these 20 hotspots during his regular life, and now he's next to this one, and historically we know that it was in this area, so that's where he is now. So there's a small subset that they're kind of dealing with when it comes to matching up hotspots to locations. And they talked about MAC address randomization, which is nice. The MAC address traditionally for hardware has been essentially a unique serial number on Earth for the actual bit of hardware in your phone or laptop or computer that is in touch with the internet, be it wired or wireless. And it's consists of the first part of it is assigned based on manufacturer. And then, so like everything that, say, Belkin turns out or Intel turns out, it's going to have a certain manufacturer ID that it starts with. And then the second part where it's just like, okay, 00001, 00002, and they just, everything that they manufacture gets a unique number. So between the companies being unique in the world and then an item being unique within what that company manufactured, between those, you make sure that you've got a unique number in the world without too much universal coordination beyond, the registry of companies that issue these things, which I'm not sure who keeps track of that. It's probably like the Internet Assigned Names Authority or something like that. But we have these serial numbers stamped on things. Beyond that, there's fingerprinting, like just a reminder, even when you're browsing in anonymous mode or so-called private mode for private browsing, I think they call it on some systems. It's like, okay, all that does is it throws away the cookies and stuff that explicitly are there to track your sessions, and it keeps it from being added to your browser history. But every site you contact, it still gets sent often a lot of information about your system that you don't necessarily want it to get. The type of browser you're using, all the fonts that are installed on your system, just the dimensions of your screen, a bunch of little variables that, when taken together, form a fairly unique fingerprint of this machine. There have been so-called super cookies. There's things that are put on there by third parties, like DoubleClick. They've got their little ad inserts on every site, almost every site across the web. And so when you go to a site, you exchange what's called a first-party cookie with DoubleClick because they are part of the web page that you're physically on. And so they have a sense of, okay, what was I referenced to this site from? It says, this page told me to load you. And that, so they know what page you're visiting. Just on and on. So we've been rather carelessly building up these footprints in every technology we've developed for years. And, surprise, surprise, it's, when we, come a day when we start worrying about security, it's all still there. So, and we're kind of like piece by piece trying to, remove it, but there's just so much of it. And there's ways that it can be used that, frankly, the designers never thought of before. And a lot of designers, they're not security people, right? Their concern is, how do I get this thing working and out the door today so I can get on to the next project? They're not sitting around thinking, how could someone abuse this? Which is unfortunate, but that's, I guess, partially because we don't attach too much liability. When someone leaks our information, they just go, oops, oh well. Worst case is they give you a year of credit monitoring or something if they've leaked your like your social security number and bank account and your credit card number, and that's about it. And that's, that is trivial compared to the cost of actually properly protecting stuff, providing a protection level commensurate with the value of the information that they have. So, if you throw up, a steel cage around a bicycle, that's probably proper protection because it's more of a hassle to get through the cage than it is the value of the bike. You put a pile of gold bars in there and all of a sudden people are going to get real creative about, how much resources and cleverness they're going to throw at the problem to get in there, and it's essentially going to be gone. So not all security things are the same. Not all values are the same. And it's, kind of comes back to that idea of what they call a threat model. What's the threat model here? And so part of the protection of your systems and your personal life and your personal gear is not just in ramping up the security, but keeping the value of what is there at a manageable level, so that that it's not going to be attractive enough for someone to apply the level of attack that would be needed to get through your security. If you just, so it's usually enough to avoid the low-hanging fruit of security problems, and then make sure you don't compile all your valuable stuff in one place. Like, say, if you've got Bitcoin, don't do that stuff on your phone, and don't do that on the computer you use every day. You want to use something separate and ideally kept offline when not in use, kind of system for that, because it's got a higher value, and someone's highly motivated to attack any common system you use to secure it, just because collectively what is being secured has a tremendous value. And if someone finds the hole in one Bitcoin wallet, they found the hole in all Bitcoin's wallets effectively. All right, well, let's move on to another topic, and we're going to start this off with a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. This week in Enterprise Tech 306, the ruling that one ISP markets are competitive.
This is Twit.
Let's talk about the FCC side of things here. Now, many audiences members actually live in areas where they may only have one internet provider, and the price is high, the service is poor, and they have really no leverage to make it any better. Well, the FCC voted last year to eliminate price caps imposed on some business broadband providers such as AT&T and Verizon. And now what that means for businesses is that FCC eliminated caps in any given county if 50% of potential customers are, quote, are within a half mile of a location served by competitive providers. That means that business customers with just one choice are often considered to be located in a competitive market and no longer benefit from price controls. Now, this decision affects BDSs, or business data services, which is actually dedicated to what they call point-to-point broadband links, which are delivered over copper-based CDM networks by phone companies like AT&T, Verizon, and CenturyLink. Now, FCC's decision was challenged in court by the competitive local exchange carriers and purchasers of business broadband, which actually include Sprint and Windstream. But the U.S. Court of Appeals actually agrees with the FCC. The interesting thing here is that the court also rejected challenges to the economic theory and merits of the FCC's competitive market test. Now, here's the court quote of their decision. Quote, the FCC made rational choice which evidence to believe among conflicting evidence in its proceedings, especially predicting that what will happen in the markets under the jurisdiction. Now, they actually get to choose, the FCC actually gets to choose which evidence they believe. Now, some groups like the CFA believe that because nearly every enterprise, nonprofit, and government institution purchases BDS for essential connectivity, charges are ultimately passed on and borne by consumers and taxpayers. Now, in fact, mobile users will also be affected by this because those higher monthly rates, because most wireless carriers actually purchase their network connectivity from BDS providers. So, guys, I want to throw this over to you. I mean, does this make any sense to you? Maybe to you, Curtis, first. Does this rationalization of competitive markets and competition make any sense when it applies to a monopoly in an area?
Well, I don't think so. But then again, I think what we have here is one of those great examples of the fact that language used in laws and regulation may mean something entirely different than it means in normal conversation. I mean, many attorneys depend on this. And so what we have is, something of an Alice in Wonderland thing where the words mean what the regulators say they mean. So what we think about when we talk about the word competitive obviously has been defined to mean something else in terms of regulation. Now, I think that by any rational meaning, if you've only got one incumbent, then it's not competitive. But I also think that what we have is an FCC that has shown itself to be hyper pro-incumbent,
Right.
hyper pro-carrier, and very much non-consumer based. And we're learning that that means non-consumer bias, whether the consumer is an individual or a corporation. So I suppose that the lesson to be learned here is that if you want preferential treatment from the FCC, you just need to go out and buy your own network.
Right. Well, the brief, the FCC actually put out a brief, and it talks about 3 and even 4 level firms and areas for the markets, but it never really talks about the competition between 1 or even just 2 firms and markets. So why they say a monopoly market is still considered competitive, I don't know. What do you think, Brian? What's the FCC thinking here?
I'm not really sure. I think it may be the fact that it's still, provided you're willing to jump through the hoops of fire and do all the work, that it's still possible to get a waiver and get another provider pulled all the way to your location, provided that other provider is sufficiently motivated, right? So what they might be saying about these particular scenarios, that the CLECs, the carrier local exchanges, those smaller businesses might actually have the facility to cross these paper boundaries, but in reality, it costs those businesses too much to pull service to a location that might only be serviced by one ISP at this point in time. So I'm trying to come up with a rationale, and it just seems utterly corrupt at its core. But I think that might be what they're pointing to. But it really, you called it right out in the core of the court decision, is that they're really leaving it up to the FCC to rationalize, what's the reality and what might happen in that market in the future, right? So the court's almost saying, hey, the FCC can predict the future within reasonable parameters about what might happen in a market to create competition. Not really, I'm really trying to play the devil's advocate here, so we're not all just slamming this decision. But it really does seem like the erosion of net neutrality and the erosion of consumer rights when it comes to carrier access was already slipping and really had very few protections in my mind. Is really it's getting worse, not better.
Right. Now, in the FCC's brief, they also claimed a little bit of a rationalization themselves, and they said that the cost of regulation is likely to outweigh the extra cost paid by consumers when dominant carriers can, what they call, exercise market power in the absence of regulation. So that they're basically saying that, hey, if we have a competitive market with 1 or 2, it's going to cost us more to regulate anything than it is to just kind of let it go in the wind. I mean, let's go back to you, Curtis. Is this a way to govern us, to regulate this, to make sure that there's competitive markets, or that the consumers win here, or is there a better way?
Well, you start to get into a whole discussion on the philosophy of regulation, and what we have again is obviously an FCC that operates from the philosophical position that regulations should be as limited as possible. And so they see this as a way of limiting those regulations. Do I think that being a little more proactive might give better results? Well, I do, but that involves my philosophy of regulation. I'm okay with a little bit heavier hand than the current FCC is happy with. I think it gets down to something that's similar, and I'll give an example. Here in Florida, we recently had our primary elections, and the way it's written, if you have no, if all you have, for example, is a Democratic primary in a particular race, if there is no Republican, then the Democratic primary is open. That means everybody can vote, because that primary will determine the winner of the election. So there are an awful lot of people who go around doing things like entering write-in candidates for particular races to make sure that there's someone in the other and the primaries aren't open. I think what we have here is the FCC doing things like saying as long as, say, Hughes satellite exists, then there is no place where you aren't going to have some level of competition. Wherever it's possible to find some dark cable, it's going to be possible to have an option for a different network service. So if you define it in the broadest possible way, then you get to the situation we have here. For most organizations, though, except for the very largest customers, what you really need is a good, strong ISP. And that's where the regulation breaks down under the current situation. I just, like I said, philosophically, I'm comfortable with a bit more regulation than the current FCC Board of Governors is.
Right. So, Brian, you have a little bit of a different view of rationalization of this, right? Because you feel that this could actually be altered by the local markets, local exchanges, right?
Right. So there is a way to look at this and say that, all right, well, the AT&Ts and Verizons of the world, they think, listen, we built this big backbone infrastructure that connects, huge hundreds, thousands of miles across the United States, across oceans, around the world. So if these local carriers and local exchanges feel like they're being blocked out of certain markets where we've built infrastructure, they're more than welcome to build that last mile infrastructure and reach these underserved markets where there's less competition. I mean, I'm a little hard pressed, right? There's a little bit chicken and the egg scenario because it's this type of infrastructure. The big providers have had a huge head start in terms of having the carrier network built a long time ago in the days of telephones, and been able to build across and the original cable TV. They've had these existing infrastructures that they've been able to build on and reinvest in. And these local exchanges, are looking at net new infrastructure, huge investments, and so there's a bit of an inherited position by the larger providers that the smaller providers would really struggle to build net new infrastructure. So I'm trying to see once again both sides of the argument here. I think the game changer that Curtis alluded to is 5G technology, right? That's wireless technology with the latency of a landline, and if those types of technologies take off, then you might be able to really argue that the infrastructure costs are more minimal, and that the markets actually could have more competition without all the big investment to reach those underserved areas.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. This week in Enterprise Tech 306, talking about one ISP competitive markets. I'm Dave Duncan, joined today by Nate Darnell.
Hey.
And all you need is one provider of internet, right? That's competitive.
What are the prices going to be?
Yeah, whatever they want it to be, I guess. Whatever they can charge before people start threatening to regulate them. It's meta regulation, right? It's the threat of regulation, instead of doing regulation itself. I must say, I'd never heard the argument that, it costs too much to regulate them, more than it's worth, so we're just not going to do it. I'd never heard that argument before, and it's clever, but I think it falls kind of flat because, our internet connection is increasingly becoming the channel through which we live our lives. We do our work, we do our recreation, we do our civil politics and community organizing through the internet. And to continue to treat it like it's just, some throwaway extra that is optional is just, I don't think it passes the sniff test anymore. And it hasn't for quite some time. I think we can also look to this hands-off kind of attitude for the string of broken promises where, when, like we were just talking recently with the mergers in New York, I believe it was, where the state withdrew its approval of a merger because they were not, as usual, they weren't following through on their promises to provide broadband in the rural areas, etc. And it's like, fine, okay, you don't want to keep your promises, you can just be two separate companies, and you're not allowed to collaborate with, your units aren't allowed to collaborate with each other. Okay. All of a sudden this goes, oh, wait. We'll do something. It's like, yeah, whatever. It's kind of like when we had I was just reading, or I was watching a show about the 2000s and kind of reminding me of the great implosion of the banks and the financial sectors, and these guys getting bailouts from the governments and then using it to pay themselves bonuses. Not only did they not go to jail, but they went ahead and gave themselves rewards for doing such a good job.
I know.
It's like, yeah.
I told you, people up there, they're making money inappropriately, they're spending money inappropriately, and they're touching people inappropriately.
That's right. The three eyes.
That's right.
You don't want to know where that third eye is. So, yeah, this is human nature, I guess. To that not for everyone. I mean, it's human nature, but not everyone indulges it. But the people that gravitate the positions who are in the position to exploit these things tend to be ones that will give into that temptation. Because hey, that's why they clawed their way up to that position, was so that they could indulge in those sorts of inappropriate behaviors.
That's right.
Competition equals no competition. That's just, yeah, that's not honest. I'll just leave it at that. All right, and on to another touchy subject. This one might be a little closer to your heart. Did you know that Facebook got 10,000 MRIs to do artificial intelligence analysis on?
No, you talking about brain scans?
Mostly, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
That's usually what you're doing.
Well, particularly with Facebook. I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean,
we want, not only is it MRIs, it's MRIs of you while you're on Facebook. No. Anyway, so we'll discuss that in just a second.
Okay.
But
they're probably figuring out what's happening to people's brains when they're on Facebook, and it's
they're determining a long-term trend of shrinkage, I think.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. Remember those early 1980s, like this is your drug on brains or your brains on drugs?
Yeah, I like the first way. The thing that's wrong with these drugs is the brains keep getting in the way.
And then you throw the eggs in the frying pan.
Yeah, right.
Remember the Nancy Reagan?
And I was going, yum.
Yeah. See, I mean, this is exactly this is what your brain looks like on Facebook.
A zombie is like into this advertisement. It's like, that's exactly what your brains are like.
That's right.
All right, so let's check out twit.tv. This week in Google 470, 10,000 MRIs for Facebook.
This is Twit.
Facebook is being asked, well, let me ask you this. I really want to know your opinion. Facebook's artificial intelligence lab, right there, those 4 words bother me, is working with New York University's medical school to make MRI exams 10 times faster. NYU is giving an anonymous, they say, data set of 10,000 MRIs with as many as 3 million images of knees, brains, and livers to Facebook. So, wow. Facebook shouldn't have an artificial intelligence lab, first of all.
No, it should.
Give it to Google.
Why?
Give it to somebody who cares about the world. Don't give it to the worst spy agency in the history of mankind. It's like saying, we're going to give it to the KGB. You don't mind, do you?
Okay, well, maybe they could have given it, maybe they could have made it an open data set. That would have probably been better. But
yeah, I mean, if it's anonymous and it's pictures.
I don't think Facebook should be in the AI business. And they say, we want to make MRIs faster. What does Facebook care if MRIs are faster? They don't care about that. That's not their goal.
They're trying to test different models, but testing models for the benefit of humanity or against anonymous data sets makes other things more powerful. I don't think that's...
Yeah,
I think they should have made it open.
This is what the AI research group at Facebook said. They started to talk about this with NYU last year because Facebook's AI team wanted to work on something with real-world benefits, even as
it performs basic research on how to spy on you.
Think about it. If you're trying, I mean, AI researchers, man, you've got a couple ways to get them. You can get them notoriety by giving them great data sets and let them publish awesome papers that people love. You could pay them a lot of money and give them fabulous benefits. So Facebook, everybody can pay them lots of money and give them fabulous benefits. So Facebook just wants them to be able to also like cure liver cancer. That's a nice way to recruit people.
It's not, it's not really, though, Facebook's business model to cure liver cancer.
No, it's not, but it's their business model to have happy AI researchers that want to work for them.
That's true. But I don't know.
There's also a big division. I don't know how big it is. I'll take that back. As a sociologist, I shouldn't be making estimates about size. But within Microsoft, there's a research division related to AI and genetics and machine learning. And so I can see that part of this is probably related to a tax write-off that has to do with developing, this kind of good for the world data. Like when you make that much money as an organization, you can really spend on any kind of lucrative lab-based research, whether or not you intend on implementing it or using it. That's what worries me, is that, you give privileged access to this group that doesn't have any
plans to do anything good for society. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is there's lots of computing power and lots of great researchers in public universities that could really do some wonderful stuff with this, and at NYU itself. So I'm wondering where and how the partnership came together and why Facebook becomes the best, group for the job when we have so many other, medical facilities that could, really use that kind of data, as well as, they can produce different and more interesting outcomes by having it done in a way that it can be implemented. I wonder what the implementation strategy is, or like how the machines will eventually change.
I guess it's silly of me to worry about Facebook when Google's doing the same thing and they're just as interested in personal information and stuff. I just feel like,
well, and what if, like, just bear with me here, but old people, we're getting up there in the world, right? There's a lot of us, and there's apparently not a lot of young people on Facebook. So maybe this is a potential revenue source. I'm not saying but you don't close those avenues off if you have access to them.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, we'll work. We can kill lots of birds with this one stone.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from twit.tv. This week in Google 470, 10,000 MRIs for Facebook. And was it everything you were hoping it would be? I heard you chortling during some of that. What was that one? What was your big laugh line in there?
So one of the big laugh lines was that why give this information to Facebook? Which it would be equivalent to giving it to the KGB. Right. And so what I'm watching with Facebook and some of these other big tech companies is basically like Big Pharma 2.0.
Oh, yeah. Right.
How did the pharmaceutical industry game Western medicine to turn it into the most profitable business enterprise on the planet? Well, it started many decades ago, almost 100 years ago, finding its way into medical offices around the planet.
Right.
With very skilled salespeople. And then going beyond that to influence and arguably direct research that favored the pharmaceutical industry. And so what I think Facebook is trying to do now is it's trying to send large boats of money in the same way that the pharmaceutical industry placed members of the industry on the boards of directors of various universities around the country so that they could influence the way that money was spent and they could influence the research that was being conducted. Now, Facebook could do this on its own. It has the money to do it. It could just hire people to do it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't carry the same public buy-in. It's a little
bit of image washing.
Yeah. So if you could get a university to do it, while you're actually paying them lots of money to do it, you know, people don't see the money changing hands as much. They just see, oh, this was published by Columbia. They don't see, even if there is a disclaimer at the end of the research, it's generally the very last thing people read if they even get to that. It's that, oh, that's what this research said. Facebook is healthy for you.
Yeah.
If you just stay on Facebook, you'll have greater cognitive ability. Your memory is better. You know,
you'll be able to remember posts from 10 years ago.
That's right.
Because they keep showing. They're using
That's
repetition.
right.
They're showing you.
Or
remember when this happened a year ago. It's like, oh yeah, I do remember it now. Thank you, Facebook.
Thank you. Or it's very similar to, you know, smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day is no different than just eating a Big Mac every single day.
Sure, same thing.
You know, so what
they cost more, but
they're you know, they learn to spin the rhetoric to benefit their long-term agenda. Right. You know, and right now Facebook,
it's like, how is it equal? Maybe calories? I don't know.
Facebook is doing its best to build bridges with public good because it's on the precipice of being broken up.
Yeah, doing some serious. Oh, look, a social media monopoly or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, they even had their project with, I think for them Google did balloons, they did drones for doing getting wireless internet into areas that did not have internet at all. You remember that project they were talking about?
Why don't you just run fiber?
Well, this is the rural issue where, you know, it's like, oh, okay, we've got, 15 huts in an area of in 10,000 acres of land. And it's like you just don't get the bang for your buck for trying to run a fiber optic cable to every human being out in Montana, say. So that they would say, okay, well, let's do these not quite satellite approaches.
Yeah, but the side benefit, the side benefit of using wireless is that it makes it much easier for an outside group to track you.
Yeah, well, in this case, the benefit is they were.
Benefit to who?
To Facebook was that they were making, Facebook free, and then you had to pay to get to other sites and things like that. There's also some subsidized internet they were doing. They were doing a couple things. One was
the soda pop is free. If you want the broccoli, you're going to have to pay for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then of course there is the underlying issue of Facebook and AI technology. And I think someone was saying, it's like, I don't want Facebook to have good artificial intelligence. That's the last thing I want for them to have, so they can better manipulate people.
Right. They need genuine intelligence. That's what Facebook actually needs, genuine intelligence.
Well, that would be something, but I don't know if we're going to get that.
I mean, that includes genuine intelligence and includes soft intelligence. You have to be a human being looking at the way human beings are actually behaving and then exercising some degree of positive influence, because clearly allowing them to run amok on their own creates a whole bunch of extreme behavior, which is what we've witnessed for the past 10 years on Facebook.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of the philosophy of run fast and break things.
Yeah. But see, again, this is what happens when you allow like a boy leader with no real bandwidth.
The boy who would be emperor of everything.
That's right. I mean, this is the challenge in allowing young engineers who really, especially for those who are in the engineering paradigm and really, I would argue publicly, don't have a lot of emotional bandwidth, because that's how most engineers think. That's how they are. They've
got their simplified model for what humanity is, and that's what they're servicing.
Their emotional intelligence, by and large, engineers have reduced emotional intelligence. That's why they go into the fields that they do, because they excel in technical things. They excel in those areas that are generally black and white and binary. Those areas that are gray, or those areas that require empathy or sympathy or emotional support, are areas where they can do, but it's not their native wheelhouse.
And those things are still useful in the tech field.
They are. As a matter of fact, I would argue that those individuals that have those skill sets are generally those that climb the ladder and make the most money, because they can understand.
They oversee the ones who don't.
They oversee the others. So my point being is that when you allow someone who's a coder to begin creating a platform that will psychologically affect the world, this is the challenge, is that you haven't been a parent yet. you haven't even been really,
you haven't hatched an egg yet.
You haven't been somebody in a position of significant power and authority overseeing an entire community. You're building it on the fly, right? You haven't risen the ranks. You haven't gone step by step to be mentored by somebody else on how to do this.
You didn't have time to change, to pressurize.
That's right. He was
you're getting the sociological equivalent of the bends from changing atmospheres too quick.
So here's Zuckerberg's Achilles heel. He was not mentored by sociologists. He was mentored by venture capitalists.
Yeah. Well, that's a bad start. And
how do you turn it around, right? And so therein lies the issue. You almost can't turn it around. At this point, you've let the cat out of the bag. Now you have to let the fire burn out. And what happens?
Well, and there's also the competition to get people close to him that will keep him from destroying the world.
And so kind of what's happening with Zuckerberg right now.
In other fields too.
Right. So, see, exactly. I mean, just like in politics in general.
Yeah, I won't go there, but no experience governing and then going straight to the top.
What I will say in a very sanitized way is that there are people that end up in positions of power and authority, whether or not you're, for instance, McNeely, who was president of Sun Microsystems. He knew logistics beautifully. I mean, he ran that company very well. The problem was he had to have a PR person by his side at all times.
Keep his foot out of his mouth.
Because he would say things that were so direct that the average consumer or the average listener, their frame of reference is different than his.
Yeah.
He's running a highly competitive, multi-billion-dollar company in a cutthroat industry.
To keep keep profits up, we need to dismiss this many families.
So you have to surround yourself with people that can buffer what you're actually saying. We've seen that a lot in recent years.
Yes, we have. And I would forward to you that part of that is due to technology, because it is a force amplifier, because it catapults people, their reach in society or their ability to accomplish things. These are different forms of leverage that are facilitated through technology, like, say, Twitter. It lets you get your message directly out to a large number of people. It lets you selectively get your message to the people that will respond to your message without as much backlash from the people who don't. So it lets you tune a message, and that ability, that technical leverage, has caused, in many areas of society, people to be launched into positions of power over others that they are not ready for, and the traditional norms and processes that keep people like that out of those positions were ineffective.
Right.
So that is what we're dealing with today, and that's, again, another reason why it is important to understand technology, how it has these effects on the world, and hopefully how to apply some ethics into what gets developed and how it's deployed. And worst case, making sure that everyone has the same opportunity to use its leverage power so that things are somewhat in a balance of terror, if not a balance of peace. So let's see, we'll do one more quick tip. I like to round things out with some good news. So here is some encouraging words from the developer of PC Calc.
This is Twit.
So if anyone's listening to this who is an aspiring developer or a current developer, what advice do you have for them? I mean, your situation seems amazing. You support yourself with this one great app and another app that you've created that is still alive. What suggestions or what recommendations do you have for people who want to be successful independent developers?
Well, the most important thing is to ship something. Even if it's just write something simple, go through the whole procedure of getting it on the store. Because once you've done that, that there's such a sense of achievement from putting something on the store and being able to point at it and say to your friends and family, it's like, look, I made this is available here. And it doesn't have to be the best app in the world, but actually doing it and shipping something is really important.
And don't be discouraged by the fact that there's an existing app that does something similar to what you want to do. You can make your app better. There's probably hundreds of calculators on the store at this point, and I don't look at them. I just try and make pCalc the best that I can make it. There's a lot of good resources out there that weren't there when I started doing stuff. There's the Ray Wenderlich's got a website with lots of good examples on doing stuff. When I was doing things with 3D graphics, that was a great help. Stack Overflow, literally any question you ask, there will be 10 wrong answers and maybe one right answer on Stack Overflow, but it's a good resource. And Apple has lots of sample code and things out there. There's a lot of stuff you can look at to learn. And you can also ask people. There's a good community on Twitter and now somewhat on Mastodon as well. And if you're stuck on something, you can always ask people. There's forums on Apple's developer site as well, which are a good place for asking as well.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. I'm Dave Duncan, and that was a Creative Commons clip from twit.tv iOS Today 411 Developer Tips 239. And that about does it. But we'll just wrap up the show with a couple announcements of some local things, like we just had on the first Tuesday of the month. We had our Makerspace meeting over at Salem Ale Works, and we had 13 people turn out for that. Nice little discussions about people's ideas for places to put a makerspace, and kind of a progress report on how we're going to get our paperwork done. That's something I'm part of the leader group on. And so, it's fun. So we'll probably start doing talks again next month. So, keep a lookout for first Tuesday, 7 p.m. at Salem Ale Works, and check out the Spark Studio Salem group there. Kind of meet off we have the corner table there to ourselves. Also coming up next week on September 12th at 7 p.m., that's a Wednesday, Hack Salem is going to be having their monthly meeting. It's a group that I really enjoy, one of the older tech get-together groups, sort of software-oriented, but a really good balance of software professionals and software students, and just people there out to kind of have a light, good time, and practice somewhat there to practice their speaking ability in front of a group. So usually have a couple of fun presentations in or adjacent to tech. And with that, you've done it again. You spent an hour talking about technology with David and Nate. Hope you'll join us next Wednesday and every Wednesday, noon to 1 o'clock, to continue the conversation on Northwest Tech Show.